All right, we got a beautiful day here in North Central Texas today. And for this week's brain dump, I am making the declaration. I have officially removed back squatting from any and all programming that I'm writing. And I believe that this is something that is 100% not conducive for sport performance and for athletes, or really for anybody for that matter. But before I dive into this, let me preface with a few things. Number one, if you're a conventionalist or a back squat, absolutist, don't bother giving me a response to this, because quite frankly, A, I don't really give a shit, and B, I'm not here to change anybody's opinion or anything like that. This is just me providing my insight from what I'm doing and going through. And two, if you are not an athlete and you like to back squat and it's a part of what you do, keep rolling with it, man. No harm, no foul. But if we focus this in on specifically sports performance in the athletic realm, the mechanism of the back squat fundamentally does not make sense. I've obviously been flirting with the bilateral, unilateral, compound loading versus otherwise for quite a few years now. But as I've been going through more in-depth ACL research specifically, and also now being subjected to some new type of athletes that I'm working with, more on the younger side and in the developmental phase. When you look at the mechanisms and you look at the mechanisms of injury, it doesn't make sense to pursue high force, heavy bilateral compound back squats. If we look at an ACL injury has a couple of kind of priorities or mechanisms to it. The first one is base of support is through the heel or the hind foot. In other words, you land in contact predominantly through the heel. We then see excessive foot pronation at the midfoot. We get dynamic valgus, and we get shearing torque at the knee because of the external rotation in the tibia and then the internal rotation of the femur. That is quite literally exactly what you get during a deep back squat. So really, for that reason and that reason alone, the risk is not worth the reward, and it's not necessarily giving us the right neurological patterning for what we're going to see in sport. Others have said this well before me, and I've taken some great insight and some great input from people over the years. You look at somebody like Cal Dietz and how he's modified his programming, and several others. The solution isn't to just eliminate all high force and compound loading. It's to just understand how to manipulate those loads, or those movements rather, so that they're more pragmatic for the sake of sport and injury preservation. So definitely still get after the squat, definitely load it heavy. But instead of doing bilateral, go into a split. Pay attention to where the center of pressure in the foot is. We want to be more towards the forefoot than we do the hind foot, pretty much invariably. The next thing is, when we consider the high CNS stimulus that we get from having X amount of pounds, 400 or 500 pounds on the back, I do still agree with that being a good stimulus for most athletes and for a lot of people. There's something to that max overload or that high force loading on the CNS. But this is where I would pivot to a Hatfield, or just, again, a heavy split squat. But at the end of the day, the mechanism of the back squat does not make sense for athletic performance.